I think I've finally figured out what I'm doing for my birthday next month. Cue the trumpet fanfare, I am turning 40. And I'm not the only one of our staff members to cross that threshold this year. I remember my parents' 40th birthday. I remember parties and gag gifts from their friends. I was totally confused about why people thought it was funny to give walking sticks and Metamucil as gifts. At the time, my parents were avid skiers and tennis players and runners. They didn't need this stuff. I understand the humor of those gifts a little better now, but I'm more baffled than ever about why so much weight is given to a really arbitrary day. Sure, it feels kind of significant as a marker of adulthood. If I can spit it out, I might even dare say middle age. But it's not like I'll wake up on December 22nd with some massive change in my life. I won't suddenly be physically, emotionally, or financially different. I think part of the significance that is given to 40 is this notion that you're somehow done. You made it to adulthood. If you're going to have kids, you have probably done that or you're well on your way. You're set in your career path. There's sort of this myth that at 40, you're fully baked. You are who you are, and the rest is just coasting. And yes, I do know who I'm talking to. I know that for many of you listening, 40 seems like a kid. You probably remember those days fondly. You can also recall the adventures and the changes that came in the decades after 40. I know there's life after 40. If I'm honest, though, it's difficult to imagine life at 60 or at 80. It's difficult to imagine what I'll be doing or who I will be. Part of what I'm experiencing and doing my best to avoid is what psychologists have started to call the end of history illusion. It's not limited to me or 40th birthdays. It's something that we all experience no matter what our age. Studies have consistently shown that if you ask people how much they've changed over, let's say, the past decade, they can pretty accurately give an assessment of the things that happened to them and the way their personality might have changed. But if you ask them about the future, if you ask how much they think they will change in the next 10 years, they come up with a very different answer. They hardly think they'll change at all. It's difficult for us to anticipate significant change coming in the future, even when we know that we've grown and changed in the past. It's a documented psychological phenomenon. In 2013, someone finally gave it the name the end of history illusion. We recognize that we've undergone change, but the idea that it will continue unabated is just impossible. And this inability to anticipate change doesn't just apply to us as individuals, it also comes up in much bigger picture questions. It's actually where the name of this phenomenon came from. As I was finishing my bachelor's degree in political science, one of the popular and widely discussed books was The End of History and the Last Man. Francis Fukuyama in 1992 argued that Western-style democracy was on the rise, and once enough countries drifted into Western-style democracy, then there wouldn't be any more significant international conflict. Exactly. Political history, he thought, was fully baked. Now, the 90s were an optimistic era, But this was a best-selling book. It was a seriously considered proposal. Now we know it was a delusion. But it's also a personal delusion that we all hold. I think we can all remember some pieces of our past that seemed so concrete and permanent. Maybe it was a favorite band, or a best friend, or maybe even a spouse. 10 years pass, and some of those things that seemed so permanent become ancient history. New friends, new music, perhaps new loves enter our lives, and we will grow and change as they do. This end of history illusion may not seem like such a big deal, but if Unitarian Universalists had anything like heresies, this would be counted among them. From the very beginning of American Unitarianism, we have focused on human growth and societal improvement. By the mid-1900s, that emphasis on personal growth was packaged in a philosophy called humanism. Hopefully that word humanism isn't completely new to you. It's one of our 6 key sources in our tradition. It says, quote, "Humanist teachings counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit." So humanism challenges us to keep learning and keep growing, with a reminder that what seems so true and certain today likely will expand in the future. The easiest way to understand humanism might be to understand humans at the center of things. Like Copernicus discovered the heliocentric solar system. It was revolutionary when he realized that the sun was at the center, not the earth. It totally transformed the way we understood our place in the world. Now, in religious life, the humanist twist was just as revolutionary, because humanists believe that human thriving is the supreme importance, not someone else's ancient understanding of God. Instead of investing our efforts in upholding tradition, instead of assuming that teachings from the ancient world are the best way to understand ourselves today, humanists believe in the ability of science to describe the world around us. Both hard science and social sciences have given us unprecedented understanding. No longer do we derive our ethics from theological speculation, but through reason and experiment, we have the means to search for answers ourselves. Humanists we believe that it's irresponsible to dismiss the findings of science in our religious lives. What's true in houses of worship must reflect what's true in classrooms and in laboratories. Occasionally, humanists get mixed up with atheists. It's an easy mistake to make, but they're actually quite different. Atheists state firmly that God does not exist. Humanists, on the other hand, believe that belief in God isn't necessary for meaningful life. We humans have enough going on with reason and ethics and artistic expression to have rich, meaningful, amazing lives without speculating about supernatural beings. They don't argue against the existence of God, they just don't think it's that necessary or helpful. The fascinating twist is, though, that humanists embrace religion without thinking God is necessary. They believe that religion, with its ritual and culture, is a great tool for us to make meaning out of our lives. Religion builds community. It shares history. It builds an ethical atmosphere. It organizes to help those in need. Religion does a lot of wonderful things with or without God. You may remember a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about world religions and said Buddhism is largely disinterested in theological speculation. Traditional Buddhism is largely a humanistic religion. It aims at alleviating human suffering through a particular life path. The Buddha even specifically said, these teachings are truthful only to the extent that they make your life better. If they're not helpful to you, leave them. Unitarian Universalism is not the only religion that's not exclusively focused on God. That's more about humanism than is really necessary for today's sermon. But what I really wanted to get at was that we believe that knowledge wasn't laid down in some sacred text 1,000 years ago. It wasn't settled 100 years ago or even this year. We will continue to learn, and that's a beautiful thing. The same is true on an individual level. Life is big and long and an adventure that doesn't end until our last breath. I've told a lot of different stories in Time for All Ages over the, 12, 13 years of ministry. The one that gets the most head nods and the one that I remember the most vividly is one about the wisdom of King Solomon. And no, this is not the story about disputing mothers and the solution of cutting a baby in two. I haven't yet found a version of that story that I feel comfortable telling our kids. No, this story is about King Solomon giving an impossible task to an advisor in his court. This advisor was getting too confident, too sure of himself, so Solomon decided to send him on an impossible errand. He sent him to find a magical ring. He said, I want you to find me a ring that will make a poor man happy and a rich man sad. His advisor searched and searched among the finest jewelers from all over the world. Of course, they didn't have a magical ring. Finally, on his way back to the court, he walks by a merchant with a few sad pieces of jewelry laid out on a rug beside the road. He thought, well, I guess it won't hurt to ask him. I'm about to return empty-handed. So the advisor asked the merchant, do you have a ring that will make a poor man happy and a rich man sad? The merchant said, hold on a minute, I think I have just what you're looking for. So he took a rather plain-looking ring from the carpet and he went and engraved something on it. The advisor saw what he had scratched into the ring, and he was astonished to see that this was exactly what he was looking for. So he rushed back to King Solomon to deliver this impossible magical ring, and Solomon inspected it closely. His smile quickly vanished. He found inside the ring was inscribed the simple words, "This too shall pass." That joy, that shame, that anxiety, that pleasure that feels so certain in the moment is temporary. This too shall pass. Life moves on and we move with it. It's easy to forget. Tomorrow holds untold surprises. Some will be challenging, some will be glorious. Some just happen to us, but many of them we get to create ourselves. Every day that we live, we're creating our futures. With humility and with hope, we create our tomorrow. We aren't done yet. We're still only half-baked. Amen.